Hi, I'm Hull History Nerd, and this is Old Yorkshire, and today we're visiting the chalk uplands of Flamborough Head, and we're visiting Flamborough Castle. The Flamborough headland has long been occupied by human beings. There's evidence going back to the Bronze Ages, 3,000 years ago. But the evidence suggests that the town itself was founded sometime in the 10th century by the Vikings. Now, the legends have it that there was a pair of Viking brothers, Skarthi, who founded Scarborough, and his brother Cormaca, also known as Flynn, who founded Flamborough. Where the truth of those matters, the town was a sizable settlement, quite prosperous by the time of King Harold, but that was soon to end. Harold lost a fight with a man called William at some place down south called Hastings in the year 1066. He ended up with an arrow in his eye, which, aside from being a real downer, also proved to be fatal for Harold. It was also bad news for England, and particularly the north of England, because the Normans moved in. William crowned himself king, and the rest is history. Unfortunately, after the brutal harrying of the north, the Normans' attempt to destroy the guerrilla comebacks and resistance of the English people, Flamborough was also devastated and its population much reduced. In the 12th century, there's a constabularius listed as being here, right where the castle is. Constabularius was a kind of a manor house from which the constable would have ruled. Constables in the Middle Ages weren't bobbies on the beat. They were actually commanders of the king's armies, but in times of peace they were assigned to live in an area and basically keep the peace there. They would report criminal matters to the bailiffs and seize the properties of debtors and so forth. The Lord of Holderness, the person who actually ruled the entire area, was very briefly a man called Drogo, but he didn't last long, shall we say. Drogo's diary. Monday, become Lord of Holderness. Hurrah! Tuesday, marry William the Conqueror's niece. Hurrah! Wednesday, poison William the Conqueror's niece. Oh dear. Thursday, run away to Flanders before William notices. Friday, this is written in somebody else's writing. Die horribly with knives in my bowels for being a murderous git. And the position was soon filled by the Count of Champagne, a chap called Odo, and ruled over for the next couple of hundred years by his successors, the Counts of Aumale, later anglicised to Albemarle. Now, the family who were producing the constables produced so many constables that eventually they became known as the Constable family. Quite a well-known family in East Yorkshire, including areas that they've lived in, such as Burton Constable Hall. And in the 14th century, a Marmaduke constable is listed as applying for a licence to King Edward III to crenellate his building. Crenellations, by the way, are those little bibbly bits on the tops of castles. You know, the bits that you always see and associate with castles? They just kind of go up and down, and they've got little places where people would fire crossbows between. Well, not everybody was allowed to have them, and if you wanted to have crenellations, you had to apply to the king, and the king had to trust you and be like, "You're not going to use that fortification against me, are you? No? Good, you can have crenellations." And so the tower was built round about this time. So it dates from about the 14th century. But it would have been part of a wider range of buildings. We know, for example, that there was a courthouse here. We also know that there was a kitchen and a great hall and stables. It would have been quite the imposing property, and all that's left now are earthworks and part of the tower. Typically speaking, the constables were chosen from the commoners. It was not like they were supposed to be people of power or meaning, but the Constable family had been doing it for so long that they ended up becoming quite wealthy and being landowners. Robert Constable, the last of the constables of Flamborough, was quite the Tudor gentleman with lands and money and power. And like a lot of other Tudor gentlemen, he took offence at Henry VIII's temper tantrum against the Catholic Church and formulated a rebellion, the Pilgrimage of Grace, in 1536. This was a short-lived rebellion against Henry VIII because Henry VIII was the kind of king who didn't like rebellions and made his feelings very well known. The instigators of the rebellion were captured and executed. Robert himself was hanged in Hull, and his body hung over the Beverley Gate in chains as a reminder to anybody else who dared question the king's God-given wisdom. As a result of Robert's treachery, the family was stripped of 35 manors that they'd accumulated across Yorkshire and Lincolnshire, and they decamped from Flamborough to Halsham, where their story continues. But not here. This is the story of Flamborough Castle, and this is the end of that story. Without the constables here to keep it, and with newer and different forms of law and order coming into power across the country, this was left to rot. Locals stripped the stone from the buildings and from the tower itself, until all that's left is what you see behind me, just a ruin of tower and some earthworks. And that's the story of Flamborough Castle. It wasn't the site of any major battles, but it was a major centre for law and order in the entire region. Who knows how many criminals were tried here and executed. This was an administrative centre of great importance for hundreds of years. But times changed, and things moved on. So just another historical footnote for Flamborough is that it was also the site of one of the rare naval engagements between the English and American forces during the American War of Independence. There was a Battle of Flamborough, it just happened off the coast here, and it was quite shocking for the residents of here in Bridlington because they could see and hear everything that was going on. If you want more information on that, however, there is another Yorkshire History channel, Yorkshire's Hidden History, and she's done a great video on it which you can find by clicking the link which should be just up here. Check it out.